Yes, these meetings.
Live, this is the conference committee for H.493. The fiscal year 26 budget is May 9th. And we're wrapping things up, hopefully, at this meeting. We have a language packet that Joint Fiscal Office has provided us. And I was hoping somebody from Joint Fiscal would walk us through said packet.
Thank you. Somebody from Joint Fiscal.
Wait, and to be clear, with color by someone else from Joint Fiscal.
With color by someone else from Joint Fiscal.
Punchy.
Grady Nixon, Joint Fiscal Office. So this document should incorporate all the final language changes the committee has agreed to or proposed and shall agree to at this meeting. The first section you'll see is Committee of Conference Decisions on B1100, the FY26 one-time appropriations. I won't go through this section with you all. This should align with the one-time spreadsheet you've seen, and you can independently review to ensure that the language is accurate before the final bill is printed. That should bring us all the way down to page 12. Page 12 is the fiscal year 2025 closeout and fiscal year 2026 contingent transaction section.
This is what we talked about this morning. 8 to the Computer Modernization Technology Fund, 50 for the e-board to transfer, 30 for federal fund shortfalls, and 30 for other future appropriations or needs arise.
Clear? It's not. Yeah.
Starting on page 14, this is the cash fund for capital and essential investments. This is the section that aligns the big bill with the capital bill. So you'll see updates to this section to reflect the capital bill. On page 16, so this is an update to the section amending the current fiscal year's one-time appropriations list. So you'll see 3.8 million general fund to ensure that the ADEC is sufficiently funded.
And this says it carries over something?
Yes, so it's appropriating it in the current fiscal year, and then it carries forward into future fiscal years, and any unexpended appropriations carry forward for the same purpose beyond FY26.
Good solution.
And now section or page 17, this is the position section. So Emily's going to hand out the position sheet that goes along with this. And again, not all of the positions are reflected here.
You said not all?
Not all. So there's those two sections we went over yesterday where the committee is establishing positions through the pool, and there's language for that. And then the governor recommend pool created positions. Nowhere in the bill, there's no language for them.
They're all on the sheet. They're not all in the language.
Correct.
What about the? Oh, it just tells you. But it's not both. But a limited service column just tells you whether it is a limited service or not.
Correct.
So it isn't
You don't-
23, 5, and 4, it's 28. Is that right?
You don't add that. You don't add.
Oh, that's what I was a little worried about, is how do we get to that many?
No, you don't add the 4. The 4 is
Yeah.
just you've created 4 limited service positions in the government.
Right, so we're at 28 total.
Right.
I think the Senate had 34, 37, so we cut.
Yeah, we had 25.
Good job.
Did the administration come in after their
They
budget?
had 23 is.
And have more positions. I thought the number, the administration was 23.
25 and some.
So Amy Pope, Joint Fiscal. So, the last, on the second page, on the last section, I had two positions for the governor. And what he had actually recommended was extending limited service, but I had it as a new position.
Oh, so that's why it was
Correct.
21, so I've got to get that old number out of.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And just flagging for the committee, I don't believe that this reflects any positions that may be potentially created relating to the education transformation funding for that.
For us, one place.
For us, six.
Yeah, the Green Mountain Care Board.
Right. Yeah. Okay, we're good with this?
That's good. So that's what all this says.
All this stuff?
So again, not everything in the table will be reflected here. The governor created full positions show up nowhere in the bill, and then the full positions being created by the committee of conference show up in two separate sections that the committee reviewed yesterday.
You can follow by that, Grady.
If we
Grady.
took out the pool positions, how many would we have?
There's two full positions being created by the committee of conference, so 26 without the full positions.
We had two for the Human Rights Commission. We're
Oh,
full.
sorry, so 25, two Human Rights Commission, and then the AG.
Well, there was also one criminal justice.
Oh, yeah, sorry, criminal justice, not AG.
So three
Haven't
full
got there
positions in here.
Yes.
That gets us toward 25.
On page 19, so I'll defer to somebody else from the Joint Fiscal Office. This is federal funding, calculation of appropriation reduction, Secretary of Administration and Joint Fiscal Committee Authority.
Great, so the other joint fiscal office member, Emily Byrne, this is how we execute the language that we spoke about this morning in terms of the thresholds that trigger joint fiscal committee review in the event of federal fund reductions. So the part A sub 1 is just defining what unduplicated function total is. This is where we exclude the duplicated appropriations, the global commitment fund, interdepartmental transfers, and the internal service funds.
Okay, so I think there's a line 7, a duplicated F.
Yes,
Okay,
we caught that.
maybe
And then-
unduplicated F.
And also excludes the education funds for the purposes of determining unduplicated funds, and then defines government function as is outlined in A 108 of this act. So that's where you see general government, protection, education, et cetera, listed. And then in subpart B, this is where we get into the math, if you will, on what's going to happen. So part 1 is this is sort of like where the governor can take action. So this is what says less than 0.5% of the unduplicated function total or $2 million, whichever is greater, is where the Secretary of Administration and the governor's office can make changes, and she'll notify the Joint Fiscal Committee of their spending reduction plan. It can't be more than the amount of federal funds that are reduced. And they can't reduce more than 5% in any total amount appropriated in any specific section or subsection. So they couldn't take all the money out of one place to implement it. Subpart 2, this is what triggers Joint Fiscal Committee. So this is greater than 2 million and 0.5 of 1%. So this is what sets the bottom threshold at $2 million for any function total, but less than 25% of the unduplicated function total or $50 million, whichever is less. So that's how we set the bounds around for Joint Fiscal Committee involvement. This is Secretary of Administration, subpart A, Secretary of Admin prepares the spending reduction plan, and this follows the same process as 32 VSA 704E, which is the existing rescission process that we have in statute, and that outlines, the process for it. It's a 21, that they have to submit a plan, and Joint Fiscal Committee has 21 days to review, take a public hearing, and then vote on the plan. As part of this, so we've got $50 million that's set aside for the emergency board to transfer appropriations if necessary. This is just saying, as part of this expenditure reduction plan, the Joint Fiscal Committee can work with the emergency board to utilize that appropriation. This is subpart I that's appropriated as part of this expenditure reduction plan. They can revert unexpended funds or unobligated funds and make reductions or transfers and appropriations as necessary to achieve a reduction if needed. And then subpart C is what establishes how we're going to calculate the federal funds amounts. So in the historically, as part of the emergency board adoption of federal funding, they only adopt the current year's federal funding amount, which we need to have a baseline in order to calculate changes from. So this establishes that the federal funds as appropriated in this act are the starting point for calculating changes in federal funds. And then at the emergency board, or sort of in the future, if there needs to be a reduction in federal funds, it will be based on what's adopted by this body in this act. That is that. There's one piece that I don't know that we have spoken about, and it's not in here because it has been taken out of the bill, but also as part of this in the Senate passed version, there was language that allowed the emergency board to make transfers from the stabilization reserve if needed. That was put in before we sort of had a settled year-end construct. In conversations, it was determined that it was unnecessary to give the emergency board the ability to access the general fund balance reserve because the emergency board can only transfer up to 2% of existing appropriations. Meaning, and given that there's up to 50 million that's going to be set aside on the contingent list, and it's likely that that will get fully funded, there is the access to the general fund balance reserve provides more access to the emergency board, but would exceed the amount that they can actually transfer. So it's been determined that that is unnecessary at this stage. And if sometime down the road in the future, there is a need for session law to allow the emergency board to access the general fund balance reserve while the General Assembly is not in session, the General Assembly could put that into session law in the future. But at this time, it's not necessary. Yes.
Okay,
I think that's everything on that. I'll turn it back over to someone else who enjoyed.
anybody else anybody have any question of or to anybody at JFO on this language? Looks like what was in the chart that we saw this morning.
I think for one time, the chart was actually easier to understand than.
Yeah.
Usually the
It was very helpful.
I like charts.
On page 22, so this is a Senate proposal of amendment to section E 300.3.
We have a question from Senator Lyons on this.
Yeah, so in conversation with the board, they are not going to make a distribution. I don't even think they'll be making a decision until 26. So the date of July 25 is probably premature. Right, so maybe the language could be when the determination is made and for distribution. And maybe no later than February 1st. 26. Yeah,
If they're not gonna do anything till next year, is February too early?
well, I'm thinking BAA, how would it affect that or not? So that's why I say when the decision for distribution is determined and then again, when the distribution, happens.
What about like within 30 days? What about something like within 30 days of,
We have something within 30 days of decision.
Yeah, that would work for me.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because we don't know what the date's gonna be.
No clue,
It may be,
no clue.
yeah,
Yeah.
so within 30 days of. And then,
The
Up to-
decision for distribution.
right, and so do you want that to just go to joint fiscal, or if it's during the session, you?
It should go to
somewhere else?
committees, yeah, committees and appropriations. I would-
Right.
Yeah. Policy.
So we
committees.
change this instead of joint fiscal to the appropriate committees, not July 25, but within 30 days of the care board making the decision on distribution.
Yeah,
Those are the two changes.
Right,
be great.
Got that?
Yep,
Fine.
we'll make that change.
Okay.
making the decision or making the distribution?
Termination on the distribution.
Yeah,
Yeah, probably the best.
It'll be a.
take a while to write
It'll be a
checks.
board Order, or do they?
It'll be an agreement between the board and the network, net and hospital, so I don't know how they'll do it, when they'll do it.
So with that proposed change, the committee of conference accepts that proposal.
Okay. with me.
Yeah,
On page 23, so this is section E 306.5 relating to the Maple Mountain. So this directs the Agency of Human Services in sub A to seek approval from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services to obtain federal matching funds for the first year of the implementation of the Maple Mountain Family Medicine Residency Program, and establishes legislative intent regarding the future appropriations for the program. In sub B, the language states that if CMS does not approve the agency's request, the agency shall evaluate other potential opportunities for funding the program, including matching state dollars as a global commitment investment, as a graduate medical education expenditure, or through another mechanism. Then in sub C, the language states that the agency shall report to JFC at its July 2025 meeting on whether the agency was successful in receiving approval for federal matching funds. And I would note that in the B1100 one-time appropriations section, you'll see two separate contingent appropriations relating to this. So there's one appropriation to AHS for general and federal funds, and then one contingent appropriation to DIVA for global commitment funds that would be triggered if CMS approval occurs.
So if they get CMS approval, does it then automatically happen?
Yes.
So we don't need, because before we were talking about it at our September meeting and then, okay, we don't need it.
right.
Okay.
This is, yeah.
Okay.
I'm checking with other people too. I think they said, but I'm glad you're. That's important.
So they, I mean, I guess they would still report to joint fiscal, but we would know.
So there would be a report in July on if the request was approved by CMS. And there's no language relating to further reports, but presumably the Joint Fiscal Committee could, upon hearing the report at the July meeting, request an additional report back.
Makes sense.
We don't need the joint fiscal committee to do anything at that point.
We,
The appropriations would automatically be triggered if approval.
So that's why report to the joint fiscal?
well, because we want to know whether it's happening, and then if it
We
isn't,
need, what else?
what we need to do. We need to know whether it worked or whether it didn't, then we know what's happening. I
Okay.
think that's important.
We love reports.
Okay,
And so all of those changes will be incorporated. We'll present the committee with a rough draft of the full bill. Once you go off live, I would note for the committee that rough draft will not incorporate a couple technical corrections, including the straight F that was in the packet here. So you'll still see that there, but it should have everything substantive. And it will not have Senator Lyons' amendment.
Right. So that will be.
all the one times are in this section.
Yes, that section and the FY25 one section.
Right? what do other people from JFO have? Do you have any other sheets there?
Brought the operating statement as requested by Senator Westman.
Okay.
And the copies of the reserves.
You want, we all had copies of the web report,
Mhm.
Yep.
which I'm gonna propose we could change the name of at some point. In the future, so
You don't like the web report?
I don't, I want a new name,
What are you
but I'm gonna put next to the bill a committee. It's gonna be a committee to decide on the name of the web report.
Oh, they're gonna get per diem?
For DM, yeah, in the summer.
How many people are gonna be on this committee?
There's gonna be a committee to figure that out. You want to tell us anything about these things, or are they self-explanatory?
Reserves? I'll do the reserve one first. That one's more self-explanatory. So this just walks you through sort of the changes in the reserves for your action. So the starting place, the FY 24 closeout. So this is the actual balance in the reserves at the end of FY 24. In FY 25, there are some changes just sort of based on reconciling with the sort of what happens in FY 25. So like the 15.2 that goes to the stabilization reserve. I believe this is related to year-end close at 2024. So that transfer happens then. And the update to the 2753rd reserve, or the stabilization reserve calculating, excuse me, this is based on FY 2024 actual appropriations. So that's the amount that will go into the stabilization reserve in FY 25. You'll recall there were a lot of one-time appropriations and a pretty big contingency. So those contingent appropriations trigger an increase in the stabilization reserve requirement. In FY 26, there are there's some actual decreases in stabilization reserve. So because there's less one-time appropriations, you have to put less in the stabilization reserve. In 2026, human services caseload reserve, that's just a true up accounting thing that happens every year. That's the anticipated change there in FY 25. No change in the balance reserve, another 5.7 into the 2753rd reserve. And then you have the one time for FY 26 or FY 27. Those are contingent. But if all of those come to pass, then another 60 million into the reserve. So there will be just, then it's like a temporary reserve in the fund. So total reserves would be at 388 million. So then if you go to the outlook, this is sort of like the this is the financial statement for the general fund. It is on a budgetary basis, right? So it is not like an actual operating statement. So we refer to sources and uses as opposed to revenue and expenditures. Transfers in and out, but this shows, I won't walk through the details about how things have changed. I think at the high level, big picture is that the General Assembly had more money to spend from the telephone tax, from other transfers from the cannabis fund, and additional reversions on line 12. So that has resulted in sort of the increase in uses as compared to the governor's recommend. And there are some changes in the transfers below, which are also that are lower than the governor's recommend, which generates additional capacity for spending, which is why appropriations are higher than the governor's recommend. But all in all, after revenues and spending are accounted for and the transfers and amounts that need to be reserved, there is $2.5 million of unallocated spending anticipated in FY 26 based on your current structure. You should also note on line 57, this is just a summary of the reserves at the bottom. You'll notice that it is $60 million less than the sheet that I just gave you, but that's because the 60 million hasn't occurred yet. So once the 60 million occurs, then this will show up in that other reserves column or whatever amount is actually reserved for the contingent list.
Oh.
Happy to walk through more details. Good match.
You have the one time 6,427,
Yes.
which is the difference between what the reserves show here.
And that will show up once we close 25, and it'll be the number that actually is transferred. So this is from a budget perspective where you're.
I got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh. So other bills, we have 18.2 million in other bills.
And that's.
Yep.
Page 91.
Yeah,
Right,
and
that's
that is
not-
H91, 4 of it is ed fund,
Yeah,
10 bill,
And
3 of it is the 126.
right,
1 of it is medical debt, and 170,000 is OPR bill for the mental health.
right.
Didn't we put the medical debt in here?
Yes, so that's reflected in line 26 in that 18 million. Is that money being appropriated?
Right.
Then the 500,000 in other bills is the base available for the Green Mountain. That was originally contemplated as part of S36 on your bill for the Green Mountain Care Board.
Yeah. Unallocated operating surplus just flows into the end construct.
Say that again?
The 2.5 million and the unallocated operating, that just flows into the next, this part of that year end.
Yes, right now, as this stood, if nothing changed between now and year end, that would flow to the year end construct in FY26.
Rashad's checking the math.
I'm just looking at differences. Before the bills, there's just a $19 million difference between the governor's recommend and what we're doing. So not very much.
And that's mostly the.
The new bills, the bond money. Yeah, so it's not other
Right.
sources of general fund.
I can,
That's before the other bills. I'm looking at line
Yeah.
23. I also did it with the bills. And then it's obviously higher because we had the other bills in there. 34.6 with the other bills. But still, that's a 1.4% increase. It's not.
And we had more money.
And we had more money, right, right. So anyway, just interesting,
Yeah,
that's
no,
what I
no,
do.
yeah.
Sorry, I was
Yeah,
being
no.
too long.
We have to defend it, so that's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're not seeing drastically different, and a lot of the money that's in here, is the 60 million is also included in these numbers? No, that's on the other side of these numbers, never mind. Yeah, okay. And we still have, we have those that we think will work out, so I think we're in good shape. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Grady's got the bill. We can put that, have copies of the web report.
Is that, this is this red?
Yeah. Bound in red,
Red. Well, it really should.
just like a
Green. You're gonna have to
newspaper, it's
recycle
black
it,
and
though,
white and
see
red
if
all
it's
over.
a circle on it.
I remember the first jokes my parents told me that I finally understood, maybe after 2 or 3 times. Black and white and red all over. Newspaper. Warm. Oh, they are hot off the press,
Whoa.
literally. I've never gotten anything like this from you guys. This is.
Next
Well
year,
done
they'll-
yourself, Grady.
The next great American novel.
Yes. Report.
Next year they'll be green.
Yeah.
Big autograph copy.
I wanted one. I already asked for this. It's like you should.
Every year it'll be a different color. We'll call it the pink report, the green report,
The blue report. I like blue.
I'm just checking.
Okay, so
Yellow.
what's the yellow highlighting, Brady?
That is just to flag for our friends at Draft Ops who do the final editing review of it. So those are major additions the committee of conference made, but the highlight is more for the editors to know which sections to keep a close eye on, not for the committee's awareness.
Okay.
Who gets to figure out effective dates?
Somebody it is.
Yes.
Somebody at
Brady, thank you. That's the only we.
It's an impressive effective date section.
It is.
So some of those technical changes that we talked about, you fix on the.
Correct. So there will be, after the committee's review, a final version of the bill that is signed that is not this version.
So what's our plan for doing that?
What do we need to do next?
We need to read this whole
Need
thing.
to look at it. Let us know if you find anything
Okay.
as soon as you find it and pick a time. You guys decide how long you need to look at it.
30?
We're meeting at 3:30.
2:30.
Or yeah, we're already meeting at 2:30 for conference of transportation.
How long? Yeah.
It's gonna be short,
I
right?
hope it's short.
I mean,
Can we-
it's 2:00.
3 o'clock
2:00's pretty short.
for this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I like the speed read.
Yeah,
Even
not
that's
that.
Testing it's 288 pages,
Kind of correction.
unless we want to do 250.
What we just did.
Oh, well, we just did. So what do you think? for transportation?
I don't, we
We don't-
hit a slide, so I don't know.
15?
Yeah, we could,
I'll put for 3.
well, we could do 2:45 or do, because we'll find out if that snag has been, because we're either gonna get there and say it's over or not.
Do you want to do 2:15 here? How long are we gonna need when we come back?
5 seconds. I mean, if it were to,
20, we give us half an hour?
yes.
Well, no, we're meeting at 2:30.
I know, but we're saying it's fixed. We don't want a lot of time.
If what we're coming back for is to sign,
Right,
If you do that at 2:20.
okay.
okay,
Let's do
So we'll